I'd like to sort of open with a quote. And now, Norman McLaren was an animator at the NFB, and he said that film is changing, and it can't help but keep changing, which I always think is a really important thing with animation, obviously because we've seen animation change so much over the past few years, to the point where what was done in the 70s is not what is being done now in the 90s, as well as a lot of the techniques and the painting on cells is no longer around anymore. And the idea that Norman also said that animation is not the art of drawings that move, but the art of movements that are drawn. So trying to get in the head of the animator a bit. And something else that kind of, I usually when I deal with clients, I usually tell them, you know, that animation is the most misunderstood art form of all time. And what do I mean by that? I think it's because there is this idea that it's a bit of a mystery to some people. And especially for animators getting into animation, it's a bit of a mystery. It's a bit, there's a magic to it, and to sort of train yourself to learn that magic often takes discipline and a lot of hard work and a lot of patience. So I guess with that being said, let's talk about that a little bit. You know, getting into animation for people who wanted to get into animation, some of the challenges they might face, what you might have faced getting into animation, some of maybe the challenges at the beginning when you're like, oh, wow, this is not what I had expected, or this is what I had expected, and this is brilliant, and I wanted to pursue this. Some of you have actually had to, as well, transition from other formats of animation, let's say classical animation, hand-drawn, to more computer-based. So we'll start with Mario. What were your first experiences with animation?
Okay. Just trying to remember. Well, I came to, you know, my career was actually backwards because I came to computer animation first. And I was doing more visual effects and things for production houses like flying logos. That was more like motion graphics now. And I was doing that for about 5 years. And then one of the projects we had, it was like full character animation. So that was to me this window that I was more interested in that. And I went back to school for classical animation. Because I remember that we had in that studio, it was back in those days, like 1994 maybe, it was a big studio with big machines, Silicon Graphics, and big servers and all that stuff that was really, really expensive. And I remember that even with all that equipment, we were not able to get proper movement somehow. We would see these animated characters, and they were just like zombies in those days. And I remember watching things from Disney and Tex Avery and all that classical animations. I was like, you know, these guys, they can actually know something that I have no idea, that even with all this computer equipment, we can't really replicate. And I was watching this movie from Japan, I guess, Akira. Have you guys seen Akira? There's this scene that he's kind of in the hallway and he's doing like all these motions, projecting all this energy, and then the hall just goes down. And I was watching that, you know, these guys, they have just pencil and paper. And it's amazing how, you know, the strength and the force that they portray with that. And I wasn't able to do it with computers, so that's why I went back to classical animation. And that was hard because I had no undo key first. That was the first thing. It sounds silly, but I was used to the undo key, you know? And even the hard drive, I was just, you hit save, and that was it. I had all these papers, and I was like, save, and just had the papers right there. So all that, just managing the papers, that was hard. And just understanding the animation principles and the, you know, the big one for me was spacing, you know, spacing and arcs and all that. But once I got it, my, I guess, animation skills were getting better, and then I went back to computer animation after a couple of years. And I could not believe my eyes. Like, I knew what I was doing. I had more confidence. It was like a sequence of events in the animation that I was working on. I just felt more in shape, I guess. Yeah.
Emily, do you have a similar experience?
Actually, it's the reverse for me. I started with 2D. But Concordia was very independent animator oriented, not very much character animation or studio animation. So I made my own films, and every student would make their own films, and they would choose whatever medium they wanted. Some people used sand under the camera, some people would use puppet, and I chose pencil and paper. And I got a job into television animation, and that was fantastic. I didn't do only animation. There's several tasks you can do in a studio, character design and stuff like that. And then I was very reluctant to learn computers at first. I was a hardcore 2D believer. And then the industry in 2D kind of dropped when Disney decided to close down its studios, and same with DreamWorks and everything. And games became very big in Montreal, so that's when I did the switch. It was very painful at first because 3D space was very hard for me to understand. I didn't have Z in 2D, it was just X and Y. And yeah, like it was a different, I sort of changed my workflow completely. And after a couple of years, I decided to go back to school to just refresh my memory with the basics. And I realized that I felt like I didn't know anything before going back to school. Like after working for 8 years in the industry, going back to school was very refreshing. And animation mentor. And then, same as Mario though, like I got an aha moment at Animation Mentor, and it's as if all of a sudden I knew what I was doing. Like I have to admit that I still have moments of self-doubt that doesn't go away. It gets easier, but there's always this, you're always questioning yourself and you never stop learning. So I guess that's the one thing I would say to students, and it's okay. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah, so Martin, you know, you had the great pleasure. You've taught many, many, many animation students over your time, including me. So can you speak to that? Because you've been teaching for quite some time, and you've watched how things have had to change, but there's always the old sort of like principles that we need to go back to. Can you talk a bit about how your teaching may have evolved a little bit because of this?
Yeah, I don't like to think of myself as old, but I'm beginning to feel that sometimes. But I am old school in the sense that I learned animation entirely without computers. That was we used videotape to do line tests and that kind of thing. But any kind of work that needed to be recorded had to be shot on film. And also my first years, actually a large part of my practice as a freelancer was film-based. We'd shoot stuff on film, and I was also, my specialty was not traditional drawn animation. I did do some of that on a freelance basis, but I sort of got into a strange practice of doing cutout animation, thinking that was quick and easy, and then I started teaching, and I started teaching on a freelance basis, on a contract basis, and that's when computers started the desktop computers, like Mario, I know that era of the SGI and the huge mainframe computers and that kind of thing, and the desktop computers were really they would underserve work in a big way. But then that eventually transitioned when I started teaching. That's when we started using desktop computers, and they actually fit really nicely into that independent practice. And what I found in the last 5 years in particular, that computers are faster, and a big huge change with digital cameras. Now it's going back to that kind of liberty, far more liberty than when I would do animation with film, like the kinds of things that we can do now with, in a way it's going back to pre-old school in that with film there was a limit to the amount of levels you could use, or you animate with cells, you could only do 5 levels, and then you'd have to start matting and do multiple exposures and that kind of thing. And now with digital technology, you can do far more than that. It's really quite wonderful. So I think that it's liberated the independent filmmaker and the boutique animator. And I think one disadvantage of that is that there was a nucleus with gear, so that there would be a community that's kind of evolved around where the animation cameras were located, or the flat deck editing machines, and that isn't the case anymore. So animators don't really see each other unless they Skype or FTP or that kind of thing. But I think that in my time working in animation, I've seen it really blossom. It's always interesting, and there's always wonderful things happening, and I'd say it's probably the most interesting today.